order to this. Okay, hey Santa Rosa Quilt Guild. I want to introduce you to our June speaker and teacher, Judi Kirk. And my first question, Judi, where do you live?
Well, hello, Elaine. Thank you for taking this time to chat with me. I come from Canterbury in England, so I'm about 50 miles from London, heading in the direction of France. So that may help you kind of understand and fix where I live.
And how did you originally get interested in quilting? Tell us about that.
I've been interested in quilts for a long time, and in fact bought them and collected them long before I became a quilter. And I went to a local quilt show in the hope of seeing some quilts that would interest me, and maybe there would be something I would like to buy. And I was obviously very interested in the quilts, and the group said, well, why don't you join us and actually make quilts? And I'd done all kinds of needlework and craft things of varying descriptions, like most crafters have dabbled in various things. At that time, I was a fairly determined flower arranger, but all of that went out of the window when I discovered patchwork and quilting, because suddenly nothing else would do. So I joined that group, made my first quilt, and never looked back really. And that was fast approaching 30 years ago.
Oh, great. Now, I noticed from your website that you do a lot of quilt judging. Tell us about that a little bit.
It's turned into a bit of a passion, really. I originally did the training course, which is a 2-year training course here in the UK. It's quite an undertaking, and it's quite an expensive undertaking too. So it needs some thinking about before you begin. And I decided to do the course in the hope that it would make me a better quilter, and also would improve my appreciation really of other people's quilts. Didn't particularly want to judge. That was as far as my ambition went. But something happened during those 2 years, and at the end of it, I'd suddenly wanted to do more really. So I now organise the judging for the Festival of Quilts, which is the biggest quilt show in Europe. And we judge in a very different way to the way quilts are generally judged in the US. So I think we have 26 full-time judges, a few half-time judges. Each of those will have an angel, and there are some back office admin staff too. So there's probably it's a team of 60 to 70 people. So, and of course, we're all kind of a certain age where life can get in the way, because either we have issues or our children or grandchildren or parents have issues. So you're dealing with, you know, people dropping out and finding new people, and people having panic attacks over various things. And we have judges from all over the world, really. We have judges coming from Australia and all across Europe to judge at the Festival of Quilts. So it keeps me pretty busy. And I was utterly thrilled to judge for the first time in the US last month at AQS Daytona.
Oh.
It's been high on my bucket list for a long time, and I should have judged for them 2 years ago, but of course COVID hit. So they cancelled the show, and they didn't run any shows last year. So this was their first show after COVID. And it was a lovely show, and I was absolutely thrilled to judge there.
Wow. Now, do you judge? Because I noticed like the talk you're going to do with us, I think is what makes it modern. Are you specialize in modern quilts, or do you do all judging, or what about?
I judge everything, and that's what we're trained to judge. And at the Festival of Quilts, which is what we're principally involved with, our categories include what are called quilted creations. So those are 3D works. So they might be quilted clothing, or they might be something more sculptural in terms of an art piece. So we judge that kind of thing, and we also have children's categories. So they start at 5 and go up to 18. So we need to understand how to judge children's quilts, because it's obviously a quite different approach to judging adults' quilts.
Wow. Wow. Well, tell us a little bit about the workshop that you're going to be teaching for us. And it's one of our special, I'm kind of excited. I think it's our first, we're calling them mini workshops, where you're going to just do a 3-hour class for us. So anyway, tell us a little bit about that.
I like 3-hour classes on Zoom. I think 6-hour classes can be quite challenging. They can be quite a long time to look at a screen. And I think a lot of workshops you can do perfectly well in 3 hours. You really don't need 6 hours. And if you're teaching in person, you've kind of got to teach a whole day class really to justify the expenses, because regardless of the teaching time, you've got travel to pay for and hall rental to pay for and all of that stuff. But if you take that away, then a 3-hour class becomes perfectly viable. So I like 3-hour classes. This particular one began because a lady in my own quilt group some years ago now said to me that she liked making charity quilts, but she found it so expensive because she had to pay to get them long arm quilted. And when I got over the shock of thinking, why on earth are you paying somebody to quilt these quilts that you're then giving away to a total stranger? There's got to be an alternative to that. But I totally understood why, having made the quilt top, she was worried about free motion quilting it. She didn't want to muck it up, basically. So I thought, okay, well, let's get out a walking foot. Let's see what a walking foot could do, because it takes away half of the problem for you. If you're free motion quilting, you've got 2 real issues. The first is where you're going. And the second one is you've got to control the stitch length yourself. Whereas if you're using a walking foot, it'll look after the stitch length for you. And all you've got to worry about is where you're going. And often a walking foot will do that for you as well, because you're using maybe an embroidery stitch or something like that. And so the original idea was to maybe come up with a dozen ways that she could get that, what I call duty sewing, out of the way quickly and easily. So that was, charity quilts. And when your neighbour says, oh, my best friend's daughter's having a baby, you wouldn't mind making me a baby quilt, will you? It won't take you long, I'll buy you a bottle of wine. And we've all been there. And we all get bogged down with that duty sewing. I mean, really, we just want to get it out of the way so we can get on with the stuff we really want to do for ourselves. So that's where the workshop began. And then it kind of headed into what if territory, as these things tend to do. And it expanded into other things. So really, it's a play day. And at the end of the 3 hours, you should have kind of a stitch sampler of ideas of ways that you can use your walking foot effectively to get that duty quilting done. and maybe some of your own quilting as well.
Oh, great. Well, you know what? I know one group in particular that is really going to thank you is we have a very active community quilt group that we make them, and they're always bogged down with tons of quilt sandwiches that they're trying to get people to take. And I'm pretty sure Laura and Janet are going to be really happy about this workshop, because hopefully people will sign up and grab one of those quilts and quilt it for them. So
that would be fantastic. That would be really fantastic. So we will definitely look at ways to get those quilt tops quilted and where they need to be.
Perfect. Well, I just want to thank you so much for
it's been a real pleasure to put a face to the name.
Perfect. So just mark your calendars for, this is June 17th. And I think it's a special time. Let me look. I believe to accommodate, we're going to do it at 9 a.m. We were starting at 9 a.m. Our time. So you're not up in the middle of the night. Just 9 to noon.
I really appreciate that.
Okay. Well, I'm going to stop the recording. Let's see. Thank